Hello everybody and welcome to today's video entitled The Best 10 Stocks in My Portfolio. This is the weekly video where I share my portfolio and I share the latest valuation of my top 10 stocks in the portfolio. I own about 30 stocks, so I own more than these. These are just my top stocks. And this video is slightly updated from week to week, but as a reminder, I do these videos because YouTube promotes these videos like nothing else, and that's how I kind of reach out to other people on YouTube that don't know the channel yet. So that's why I have to make these videos. They really have a great reach. About 70% of people who view these videos are new viewers to the channel, which is, stunning. It's great. So that's the reason why this video I do every week. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. And let me tell you a little bit about the way I do things around here. So the way I do things around here is I invest in hyper-growth stocks, not growth stocks, hyper-growth stocks. Because I like growth stocks, Google, Apple, etc. I like this as much as the next guy. But if I were to invest in the regular triple Q NASDAQ growth stock, I would only get, 15, 16% return, real return. And to me, a 16 to 15% real return to me is like zero return. It's like there's no return because there is inflation, and monetary inflation is what I mean by that, not price inflation. There is monetary inflation, which is how many more dollars are there out there that are printed by central banks, proverbially printed, although they do print real cash for real, but proverbially printed base money. Base money grows, and then you obviously have a commercial banking system which also issues new money. And what matters is how much of that share of new money are our companies getting. And in my view, a company should get at least 15% more dollars each year on their top line in order to just stay afloat. If they don't get 15% more each year, they do not stay afloat. They do not keep up with monetary inflation. This is why I focus on hyper-growth stocks, because I have no choice. If I want a real return and not 0% nominal return, if I want a real return, then I have to look at stocks that grow their revenue at least 30%. And that's the theme of the stocks of this channel. The stocks of this channel, to be included on this channel, you have to grow at 30% or more revenue growth over the foreseeable future. I have no choice but to invest in growth stocks and innovation stocks. It's just the way it is. And why these stocks, right? Why do innovation and hypergrowth stocks, why are these the only stocks that can achieve those 30% sales increase year after year, and which then translates in theory to a 30% increase in your returns in the stock, right? If the price to sales ratio remains the same and does not bounce around much, for established companies, they don't tend to move too much over the years. If the price to sales ratio stays the same, then a 30% growth in sales equals to a 30% growth in stock price. The point is I have no choice but to invest in these companies that grow very fast and that have adoption S-curves. That means these companies tend to have products that are not widespread yet, that not everybody agrees on yet. Because when you bet on product adoption, when you bet on adoption of the products of all of these companies, that's the way for you to get in early. So, for example, Tesla, about 5% adoption right now. We're early. Same for Solar and Enphase. We're early. These are all companies that are early in their product adoption growth curve. And so the whole idea of my style of investing is to try to get into these companies when they are early and get out of these companies, sell, hopefully 10, 15 years later when the adoption is reaching 80, 90%. That's the way I view investing. This is also why by the time PE, price to earnings ratios, by the time those ratios start to matter for me, I'll be out of the stock likely. So I don't use PE because I don't invest in mature companies. I invest in brand new companies. And a key metric, if you're interested, a key metric on this channel as to why I say whether a stock is overvalued or undervalued, not the best stock, but the valuation of a stock, is enterprise value over gross profit over revenue growth. What this is a spin of the PEG ratio, the price to earnings to growth ratio of Peter Lynch, but I've adapted it to my style of investing, which is hypergrowth investing. So I use enterprise value because I want to eliminate the effect of debt, right? I use gross profit because all of the stocks I invest in are at least optimized for gross profit. And I use revenue growth because revenue growth tracks closely the growth in gross profit. And these numbers answer the question, how much am I paying for each percentage point of forward growth? And obviously you want to pay as little of a ratio as possible for each percentage point of forward growth. So that's one of the keys to understand this spreadsheet. So let me get started and tell you about the top 10 stocks in my portfolio. So my number one position, it hasn't changed. And yesterday the stock was up more than 7%, so it's not ready to change just yet. My number one position is Tesla. Tesla is more than 30% by now. And why Tesla? Why do I even invest in Tesla? Because Tesla is the company that is, of course, revolutionizing cars, right? They single-handedly forced the entire world to move to electric, and they have a very stable lead. I mean, depending on the country in the electric sector, I mean, in the US, it's between 60 and 70%. It's very stable. In that range, depending on the stats that you take. So the market share in the electric is tremendous. And so the question that I ask myself when I look at a company like Tesla is this company at the same stage as, say, Apple was back in 2008, 2009, maybe 2007? And my viewpoint on this is yes, it's looking fairly similar. It's looking like we're headed towards a duopoly in the car market, in my view. And I don't have a hard time imagining a future where Tesla in wealthy nations, not poor nations, but kind of like Apple, in wealthy nations where Tesla could be 50% of a market share. If in wealthy nations Tesla could be 50% of a market share, and the rest is all of the other builders of cars combined operating software, probably a mix between an NVIDIA software or Tesla software, that would mean that this company, yes, like Elon Musk has told us multiple times, this company will be worth $5 trillion plus at one point. If you do the trajectory, if you do a plot and you look at revenue and you ask yourself realistically, could this company have $1 trillion in sales, knowing that they're at about 94 billion now? Could they realistically have $1 trillion in sales? And the answer to that is yes. If you track the revenue, if you look at the car market, if you know the car market, there's 80 million cars, brand new cars, 80 million of them are sold each year. Their goal by 2030 is 20 million. Right, so they would capture a tremendous amount of that market. Let's not forget that cars are the second largest good that families buy. Right, after houses, real estate is the number one good. The second good that they buy is cars, and cars are going electric. Cars are moving from being appliances to being consumer electronics. It is a major revolution, and these electric cars, they get better every year and they get cheaper every year, just like good consumer electronics should. And why are people switching to electric cars in general, but Teslas more specifically? It's because they're much better, right? It's 10x on top of 10x on top of 10x. How much better is it to have a car with 100 times fewer moving parts, right? And moving parts are the reason why there's defects, right? Why appliances break? Why does technology break? Technology breaks because there's moving parts. Teslas have very, very few moving parts. Electric cars are very simple. It's a rotor and a stator. Very simple compared to an engine which has hundreds of parts. So that's one 10x improvement. But there's more than that, right? How cheap is it to drive an electric car? Well, per my calculation, it's between 7 and 13 times cheaper to drive an electric car. A tank of electricity, a proverbial tank of electricity, is going to be what, $7 to $10. A tank of gas for 350 miles, kind of the same if you take an SUV, it's going to be $70 to $100, depending on where you live. So it is roughly 10 times cheaper. And we're past that 5% adoption threshold for most countries, so Tesla is just getting started. And note that everything I've told you about Tesla so far does not even include any other potential project that they have, like energy. Energy is doing really well for Tesla. My estimates, what I've discussed, does not include energy. There's many more markets, like, for example, the network of chargers. They're going to make money on that network of superchargers. How much money are they going to make? Well, there's a lot of debate on this on Twitter, but it's not going to be zero. So this is a company that looks much more like a Standard Oil than it does a traditional auto company. And also keep in mind, when you look at the valuation of Tesla, some people get scared and they say, oh, it's a $800 billion business. This is very scary. What people don't often take into account is that, if you look at enterprise value, if you were to look at a GM or at a Ford with enterprise value and not market cap, you'd realize that they are pretty close to 200 billion. So that makes that 4 times more expensive not as scary. Why? Because their market cap is very small of, say, a GM or a Ford, because most of the enterprise value is made up of debt, right? They issued a bunch of debt to revenue finance, to pay for these vehicles they're selling. They're issuing the debt, which is very risky, right? It's how GE got into trouble. Tesla does not do that. Tesla has third-party finance the debt. Very risky to finance your own debt. So if you look at enterprise value of legacy auto at about 200 billion for say, a GM or a Ford, you realize Tesla is not that much more expensive. That's number one. And then number two, legacy autos are assembly lines, right? They are at the center of a value chain, and they assemble components from 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 1st level suppliers. They assemble the cars, but they don't own the suppliers, and they also don't own the dealers. If you take a company like Tesla, fully vertically integrated, Tesla owns the entire value chain, from the dealership, the sales setup, to the suppliers, and they own so much of their value chain, so many of the suppliers. If you look at the cars, the later models, like the Model Y, for example, something like more than 70% of the parts of the Model Y are in-house. This is actually unheard of for an automaker, right? They are not an aggregator of suppliers. Tesla actually is actively owning a very large share of its suppliers, even down to starting mining lithium in Corpus Christi, Texas. So that's how far this company goes, which to me explains to me why this valuation, in my view, is low. I do not think Tesla is overvalued. I think Tesla is part of a magnificent seven, and it has Apple potential, and it is still a company that is widely misunderstood. And we've still received from Elon Musk the guide, right, until 2030, 50% growth until 2030. He's repeated that many times. Analysts have pushed him on that on the call, and this company is on trajectory to doing 50% growth every year until 2030, which, if you start from this base, is absolutely stunning in my view. Of course, what I'm saying about Tesla is backed by the total return. If you look at the total return of Tesla, you see real returns, nominal returns for Tesla, 53% is roughly what they've been since 2013. And if you remove monetary inflation, which I do for me, it's 38% if I remove the 15% of monetary inflation. So outstanding return on this company compared to the triple Q. And in my view, what we're seeing with NVIDIA right now, the valuation reset of NVIDIA, the analysts are realizing, oh, wait, NVIDIA is a company that's bigger than we think, and it's a company that goes through a valuation reset. I believe Tesla will have a valuation reset. I don't know when Tesla's valuation will reset to a much higher level, but in my view, it will, because this company, there will be a point where people realize how large of a player this company could be, and they will treat this company as an AI company, as a consumer electronics company, and not as a car company, which is a big part of the debate. So I'm very bullish on Tesla. Number one position, 30%. I don't cover it much on the channel because every single other YouTube channel covers Tesla. So what am I going to do covering Tesla with my 3,000 followers when everybody else covers Tesla? But don't be mistaken. My conviction of Tesla is extremely high. Now, what's another stock I own? Enphase. Now, Enphase I cover a little more on this channel. I have a full 1.5 hour analysis on Enphase. I cover it regularly. I love Enphase very much. What is Enphase? Enphase is about residential solar. They provide the microinverters that enable most residential installations in the US. Actually, they are the leader in the US. They are newer in Europe. That's why the growth that they are going through in Europe is very high right now. And to me, this company is in a duopoly with SolarEdge. SolarEdge is more of a leader in Europe, and Enphase is more of a leader in the United States. But in my view, Enphase has the superior solution. And you may have seen my videos on the channel where I talk about microinverters versus central inverters or string inverters, and there's fundamental fundamental reasons as to why microinverters are the superior technology. It's Enphase's bread and butter, right? That's where most of the money comes. And down the road, I see a future where Enphase, and to a lesser extent SolarEdge, will have a very large market share, where most residential homes will produce their own energy and consume their own energy because it is logical, because it is the cheapest source of energy, because the payback of a solar roof is between 5 and 9 years, depending on whether you live in a sunny or not sunny area and whether you get ripped off by your installer or not. But of course, if you get 3 or 4 quotes, you're likely to highly reduce the odds that an installer charges you too much because you get multiple quotes, right? It's a problem for customers. When customers get solars and don't get enough quotes, that's when you get into situations with people overpaying. If you pay market rate, you should have a return between 5 and 9 years, depending on where you live. And then you get essentially free energy or near free energy for life. And again, we have plenty of solar panels that were installed and created 40 years ago that still produce energy. But as far as the warranty goes, most installers, most solar panel makers, Enphase's products will have a 25-year warranty, which is still pretty long, I would argue, and that creates a very, very nice return for you. I'm very, very bullish on Enphase. My view on solar in general is that, in 10 years from now, you take a walk in the neighborhood, most roofs will have solar. That is my view on solar. Just like at one point, most houses didn't have AC, and now most houses have AC. I think the adoption of solar is driven by the cost curves, the declining cost curve of consumer electronics, a little bit like electric cars and Teslas. Solar panels, they get better each year, and they get cheaper each year. And therefore, the adoption, in my view, is inevitable. And it is following this product adoption curve, and we are early. 4% adoption in the US, 10% adoption in the EU. We are early. If you follow Australia as the blueprint for solar, Australia was like 5 years ahead of everyone when it comes to solar. They are about at 30% of the roofs in Australia that have solar on them. To me, we will get to a point where most roofs are solar. I mean 80+%. Perhaps 90+% with enough time. So that's kind of my view on solar. I'm very, very optimistic about this. Now, let's talk about HIMS. Now, why do I talk about HIMS on this channel? HIMS may seem like an odd company if you haven't researched it. It's a company that really takes a while to understand. Because, on the surface of it, it looks like all they do is sell ED drugs and air loss products. And that's what on the surface of it looks like. But when you dig deeper into this company, you realize that this is a company that's trying to disrupt doctors and most of the procedures done by doctors, i.e. all of the procedures that are done remotely, that can be done through a doctor that you meet remotely on your phone. HIMS is going after that. Pharmacies, because HIMS is a pharmacy. It's an e-pharmacy, a digital pharmacy that ships the drugs to you, right? Pharmacies, and the insurance system, because HIMS undercuts the insurance system by making the process so cheap, so inexpensive, that customers actually don't bother using their insurance, because their insurance is going to take them a lot of time, and they value their time, especially for more minor issues, especially for people who are in their prime. You're in your 30s, your 40s. Maybe the last thing you want to do is go through a barrage of secretaries to go through different doctors, primary physician, get a referral, go to another specialist, meet the specialist, get a prescription, go to the pharmacy, get your prescription expires, you have to take another appointment with the specialist. This process is so complicated with the legacy system. HIMS is trying to make it easy as buy now, as easy as the buy now button. And how does it work? Getting treatment with HIMS, and granted, they started with minor conditions, but they're getting into real markets now, like heart health, like statins, like real large markets. How does it work with HIMS? With HIMS, you get the app. You say, yeah, I may have heart health. You click a button. They'll match you with a provider. You see a provider within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the condition. You meet with a provider, with a physician. The physician tells you, yes, you qualify, or no, you don't qualify. If you qualify, you get your drugs shipped through the mail. and you have follow-ups, and you have chat boxes, and you can talk to your physician, and you don't have to like deal with secretaries if you have a question. If you have a question, you don't have to pay $200, drive halfway across town to go meet your physician again just because you have a question about your drug. You can do that straight in the app. Talk to your physician in the app, which I think is very powerful. To me, HIMSS, the way I look at HIMSS is really creating healthcare. If one agrees to renaming the current healthcare system sick care system, which is what I think is what we have right now. Most countries have a sick care system where if you're sick, you're getting treated. But if you're going in for very minor issues, very minor stuff, you're going to have a very hard time with the current sick care system, because the sick care system is not going to be very interested with you, and they're going to bounce you back from doctor to doctor to doctor, because there's not a lot of money to be made when you catch a disease early on, and that's where HIMSS comes in. So anyways, enough about HIMSS. I realize controversial stock, but that's the nature of most of the stocks. Most of the stocks on this spreadsheet are not widely agreed upon. That's why I invest in them, because if you see product adoption early, you can ride that curve, and your investments can do very well. And no investment advice, of course. Palantir, let's talk about Palantir. Palantir is another one of these stocks that I don't cover much because everybody else covers it on YouTube. It seems like Tesla. Every time I see it, Palantir covered as much as Tesla. Palantir, nonetheless, is a company that I really like very much. I like that the CEO has guided 30% growth over the next decade. Sure, in a conference call recently, backtracked it and said it's going to be a little less. Nonetheless, I still believe in the initial guidance put forward by the CEO as I look for the adoption signs and how big data is becoming relevant, and how Palantir really helps companies make decisions. I am very impressed by what they're doing. And if you look at realistically, who could be realistically the main competitors of Palantir? Well, it would be Snowflake and Databricks, and maybe Databricks more than Snowflake. Well, Databricks is not public. We don't know much about Databricks. Even if Databricks is really putting a dent into Palantir with their data apps, we wouldn't have a way to invest in Databricks. Snowflakes, they launched their data apps, but from what I see, the number of Snowflakes, I don't think they're doing too well. Just like Palantir is not doing too well. I mean, I'm sorry if you're a Palantir fan, but Palantir is not doing too well with the adoption of Foundry right now. Foundry right now is not getting adopted like we were predicting 2 to 3 years ago. What is doing well with Palantir, though, is the military business. And that's the reason why I own Palantir. Because of their military business, I believe they could be the fourth contractor of the US government, the fourth contractor of a military industrial complex. And if they do that, in my view, it's an easy 10x. In my view, if they actually become that contractor, that main contractor, which they are, they have the highest security clearance. I think in the Palantir community, the Gotham part of Palantir is not covered enough. That would be my main complaint. It's not covered enough, and maybe it's not covered as much because yes, you can't get as much information about it. But Foundry gets the lion's share of the coverage for Palantir, and Gotham does not get the lion's share of the coverage at all. And Apollo is a great business too, but almost nobody discusses their deployment app Apollo, which is from what I understand especially interesting and stunning for deploying apps at the edge. So anyways, I think Palantir is a very impressive company. It's a company that's going through waves of hypes and then waves of despair, right? We seem to be going through hype again with Palantir, and we're going through despair about 6 months ago. So it goes through these waves. Nonetheless, to me, this is a long-term hold. This is a company that was founded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk's friend at PayPal, right? They both got together to merge their companies and say, okay, we're gonna do this PayPal together. We're destroying value, competing against each other. Let's get together. And PayPal was founded by a PayPal mafia member. So many of these PayPal mafia founders, the PayPal mafia founders, creators of so many high-end techs, including Tesla, high-end companies, including Tesla, were created by the PayPal mafia. But they invented the concept of a 10x, the concept of an order of magnitude of a product that is so much better than the competition that you have no choice to become a monopoly, which was the initial idea of the book 0 to 1. If you leave the 0 to 1, so I'm very impressed by a company like Palantir. I'm happy to own it. It's a decent position for me. company, perhaps the most hyped stock that I own before Tesla, I would argue, even before Tesla. Because Tesla now, the traditional community is now getting around Tesla and investing in Tesla. Traditional Wall Street is warming up to the idea of Tesla. I don't think they're warming up to the idea of Palantir just yet. So in my view, I'm early with Palantir. Let me move on to Crowdstrike. Crowdstrike reports earnings tonight. I'm excited about it. I may make a video about them. The CEO, of course, why do I love Crowdstrike? CEO a few quarters back, he gave us very impressive guidance, 3 years out, annual recurring revenue guidance of 5 billion, so 5 billion in ARR, and they have 5% of consulting fees, so it's actually 5.2 billion is what they're going to be at in 3 years. Which translates to revenue growth of 39%, well above my threshold of 30%. The troubles that Sentinel-1 is going through right now by putting itself up for sale are very telling of the winner-take-most way of the cybersecurity market, which I've always said is a winner-take-most market. Why is CrowdStrike winning in endpoint security? How does CrowdStrike work? Well, CrowdStrike, very simply, you install their quote-unquote antivirus on as many edge devices. So edge devices are laptops, phones, cars, whatever edge device where you have a end user using the product. So they install these antiviruses on these edge device with the Falcon software, and of course it's a cloud-based software, such that if a breach happens at any other edge device, let's say somewhere a laptop gets breached, that breach is broadcast to the entire network, such that computers can only be infected once if they so happen to do it. And since they have the biggest network, they have the most knowledge as to all of the possible breaches. And what this essentially creates with CrowdStrike is that a hacker can attack you once. An attacker can breach the system once, but can't breach it twice. So it really disincentivizes the development of malfeasance and hacks, in my view. Very interesting company. A little bit of a harder company to understand if you're not in this field, but the general thesis is obviously security. We all live in a digital world. Because we all live in a digital world, we need to have digital security, and that's what CrowdStrike does. They do digital security. I love CrowdStrike very much. MercadoLibre, then. What about MercadoLibre? Well, MercadoLibre to me is a little bit like an Amazon or an Alibaba in 2007, except it's in Latin America. They're the leader in Latin America. They also have an ad business, a fintech business. Very solid company, very well-managed company, has been around for a little while now, as any e-commerce company would have, because it's kind of the earlier innovation of tech. One of the earliest innovations of the internet is e-commerce, and so maybe further along their adoption curves. MercadoLibre is probably further along its adoption curve. Nonetheless, this is a company that has been doing impressively well. This is a company that has managed markets that have been historically very, very tough for a lot of foreign companies. Like they're managing Argentina, and they are a great success in Argentina despite inflation, right? A lot of Western businesses can't do that. MercadoLibre can. Very high net promoter score. A lot of customers love MercadoLibre. Again, it's betting on the adoption of e-commerce in Latin America, and it seems to me like it's not going to be Amazon in Latin America, and it's not going to be C Limited, right? C Limited kind of failed in Brazil. To me, it's going to be a native Latin America company that wins in Latin America, right? It's not going to be the Chinese, I don't think either. I think MercadoLibre understands how to sell in Latin America, and if the numbers are any evidence, this is a company that has been doing so well at 27% ARR. Keep in mind, before the Powell-induced crash, we were at 35% ARR. So this is a company, to me, that's going to go back at 30% growth. Very happy to own MercadoLibre. Moving on to StoneCo. StoneCo, to me, is a little bit like buying Square. In 2014 a little bit, but it's very, very cheap. StoneCo is actually one of the cheapest stocks in my universe, along with HIMS. You're not paying much for StoneCo. And StoneCo, because it's so cheap, is actually owned by Warren Buffett, but it's also owned by Cathie Wood because it grows very fast. So it's kind of one of these stocks that have the best of both worlds. What they do is payment terminals. So they have, of course, a phone app where you can pay for your phone, but they also have a payment terminal that can accept cards in Brazil, and in Brazil credit cards are very popular. Lots of customers love them, and so a lot of small businesses, we actually have more than 3 million businesses that use their payment terminal. And it is obviously a business like StoneCo is a take rate business. It's you shave off a few percentage point of any transaction that takes place as a small business. And Brazil, currently dropping interest rates, is going to see an increased velocity of money. People are going to spend more money. Another reason why I like to invest in Brazil is that the population is younger. And we know that younger populations tend to have greater velocity of money, i.e. the money changes hands more often. And when the money changes hands more often, it benefits a company like StoneCo. So StoneCo, I think it's a very innovative company. It's a company that crashed before every single tech stock crashed. And they crashed because they made a little mistake, a $500 million mistake in their collateral business, but they've moved on for that mistake. Problem is, the analysts never came back. Traditional Wall Street never came back and left this stock for dead. But in my view, this stock will rebound, and I'm very happy to own StoneCo. I think it's a solid company, and I'm glad to be investing along two storied investors like Buffett and Cathie Wood. Moving on to Nubank. Nubank is another Brazilian company, although they've expanded outside of Brazil. They're now all over Latin America. Nubank is a neobank that has a very popular app throughout Latin America. And a lot of customers now just bank with Nubank in Latin America, and it's got a very interesting focus in that it does not compete with legacy bank. It does not compete with legacy banks over there, because a lot of customers over there in Latin America are unbanked. And so Nubank is their first financial institution. And because Nubank is your first financial institution, right, made possible by the advent of the smartphone, now everybody that has a smartphone can have a bank. Their first financial institution, their first bank, is Nubank. And so what that creates is a company with very high net promoter score. Net promoter score is how likely are you to recommend to a friend. You literally have a lot of people in Latin America who love Nubank. Like, Nubank is their thing. Like, they love it because it's their first bank. It's their first time they have access to credit. First time you have access to a bank account. So this is a company that is going through explosive growth in Latin America at 77% growth over the next year is what analysts predict. 77% growth. Imagine that. Tremendous. And it's also a solid company with a solid market cap. Nubank actually, unlike some of the stocks here, Nubank actually has a higher than average institutional coverage, and a lot of institutions actually own Nubank. If you were to say what's the main distinction between Nubank and SoFi, I would argue from an investor standpoint is how many institutions are behind Nubank. And SoFi, it's a lot of retail investors who are behind SoFi, but a lot of institutions are worried about SoFi and not perhaps not as much inside of SoFi. I own both SoFi and Nubank. The reason why I put Nubank in there, and Nubank is a little bit of a bigger position for me, is because Nubank grows faster, quite simply. Nubank grows faster, they grow faster. Why? Because they don't have to fight for their customers as hard as SoFi. SoFi has to fight with legacy banks. Most people in the US are already banked, so they have to go through the process of leaving their bank and going to a new bank. Nubank doesn't have to do that because most people in Latin America have Nubank as their first banking interface, right? And they're going straight to fintech. They're not going through the legacy bank system with a branch. They're not going through there. They're going straight to fintechs, right? They're going straight to Nubank, straight to MercadoLibre's fintech. That's what they're going to. They're not going to go through the legacy bank, and I love that growth rate. To me, this is a company that will be bigger in the future. The last company that I have before I talk about Bitcoin is Airbnb. So Airbnb, why do I own Airbnb? Airbnb is a platform. I believe platforms are some of the best business models out there because platforms do not produce the goods that they sell. And they also don't spend much on marketing because typically people, potential customers of products sold on platforms typically sign up on platforms because there's a lot of products sold there. So that's the magic of the two-sided platform, of a two-sided marketplace, is that the network is the marketing. How many, take for Airbnb, how many houses are listed on Airbnb is what it takes for Airbnb to attract more people, because more people who look for accommodation will naturally tend to go to the platform that has the most accommodations offered, and that is Airbnb. So Airbnb, if you listen to the last call, CEO told us in the last call that actually they've only disrupted about 10% of hotels, and they have another 90% to go in their disruption of hotel, which is wonderful. But to me, what I find more fascinating by Airbnb, even long term, even though that alone, the hotel opportunity alone is enough of an opportunity for me to invest in a stock like Airbnb, but I like their view of disrupting mom and pop landlords. If they can succeed at disrupting mom and pop landlords, I don't think most of us realize the size of the market that could be. Most not most, but the landlord, the traditional landlord business has not been disrupted ever, and it's been done that way for more than 100 years. And imagine the value that it would be to have a layer of trust added onto quote-unquote long-term rentals, which for Airbnb would be something they call longer than a month. You have about 20% of homes rented on Airbnb that are longer than a month. What if longer than a month rentals, leasing accommodations were done through a platform like Airbnb, through that layer of trust that Airbnb provides for both the tenant and the landlord, right? Because you have a rating system which allows you to trust people you don't know. Thanks to that rating system, you have insurance, right? That's what platforms do. Typically, platforms create a layer of trust. If you look at the early days of platforms, study eBay. In the days of eBay, when eBay got launched, why did eBay work? Because they found a way to create trust between unrelated parties on the internet through their rating system. Airbnb is doing the same thing today with their rating system. I'm very bullish on Airbnb, and if you add to the fact that it's a best cost product, it's a product that's actually cheaper. If you travel as a family, nothing's going to beat renting a house on Airbnb. It's always going to be the cheapest. If you travel, let's say you're a family of 5, compared to a hotel, it's going to be much cheaper to rent a house for a few days or for a week. So that's kind of the magic of Airbnb. I think Airbnb is a heavily underappreciated, undercovered company out here on YouTube, on FinTwit, and I'm very happy to own it and cover it, even though nobody watches my video on Airbnb. Few people like Airbnb for some reason. Moving on to the last, not a stock, it's an asset, but I have to put it on there because it's my second biggest position. My second biggest position is Bitcoin. Now, for the sake of this 10 best stocks, this is a stocks portfolio, I put Microstrategy. Microstrategy I put on there because it's a proxy for Bitcoin. I could have put Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And as I do this video, and as we've gotten news of possible approval for an ETF coming, as an ETF comes from Bitcoin, I might put the ticker symbol of the ETF. Bitcoin, to me, is my bond alternative. I do not own any bonds, but I do own Bitcoin. And I believe Bitcoin is superior to bonds in just about every way in a portfolio. I think it replaces bonds, and that's why I'm very happy to be owning Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not a derivative of a US dollar. It's its own thing. It requires its own dedicated video. I've made a few videos on Bitcoin on this channel. Few people have watched them because it's a stock channel, and so there's typically, you still have a tension between people who like stocks and people who like Bitcoin. But to me, Bitcoin at its core is a very important innovation. It is money that cannot be debased. It is money that is fixed, and it is money where the price does not matter. Like Bitcoin could be 1 million, and there will not be any more Bitcoin issued. And that's the main distinction between Bitcoin and, say, gold. Gold is the other form of hard money, and you typically have a big tension between Bitcoin and gold. But gold, if gold were to go to $5,000 an ounce, what would happen is that the gold miners would mine more gold, and the market price would adjust down. You know, if gold was $5,000 an ounce, the central banks would start selling some gold, which would bring the price of gold down. With Bitcoin, that cannot happen because with Bitcoin, the supply is fixed. It doesn't matter how much energy is spent on mining Bitcoin, it's still going to be 6.25 Bitcoins in every 10 minutes that are issued. That's it. And I would argue there's a lot of Bitcoin fanatics who will never, ever, ever sell their Bitcoin. Bitcoin has also other features, like people losing their coins. If you lose your coin, you are increasing the value of the network. People losing their Bitcoin is a little bit like buybacks for a stock. Anyways, enough about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is as Shamat Palihapiti, I would say, it's schmuck insurance in case the USD becomes like the Bolivar. It's schmuck insurance. That's what this is. It's not a derivative of a US dollar. It is to me the perfect alternative in a portfolio, and I also alternative to stocks in a portfolio. And also, I just want to say this. Bitcoin is very volatile right now because of the early days, but I sincerely believe over the long run, Bitcoin will not be a volatile asset. Bitcoin will be a very stable asset over the long run. The spikes of Bitcoin that we get right now are due to its liability of newness, or due to the fact that it's a newer asset. But over time, to me, Bitcoin is an asset that should heavily stabilize, and we're seeing stabilization of Bitcoin. I mean, it's been a long while that Bitcoin has been trading around 30,000. We're seeing that stabilization. So anyways, very bullish on Bitcoin. To me, as far as stocks go, my proxy exposure for Bitcoin is MicroStrategy, mostly MicroStrategy. Turns out I should have probably owned GBTC instead of MicroStrategy, but I'm happy with MicroStrategy. And most of my Bitcoin I own in pure form. So pure form, I really think is a better way to go. In pure form, you memorize 12 words and you store it in your mind, and that's the beauty of Bitcoin. You don't need any sort of outside institution to hold it for you. You can just memorize your private key, 12 words, memorize it. It's in your head. It's forever in there. So anyways, thank you so much for watching. This was obviously no investment advice. This is just entertainment. There's no investment advice at all. I hope you were entertained. I really do. This is entertainment. So appreciate your likes. Thank you for watching video. Please subscribe. And if you can follow me on Twitter, I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.